Hey, this is the Daily Overpass. My name is Eric and I make apps. Now today we want to ask, what operating systems should you code for? You know, I'm a bit older than a lot of you guys, right? And I can remember, children sit down, I want to tell you a story. I can remember when operating systems changed once every 3 to 5 years. I can remember when development tools changed every few years. I can remember like reading 2 years ahead of ASP.NET what was going to be featured in that new technology that we couldn't wait to get our hands on. And now things move so fast, especially with mobile, that we get a new operating system every year, right? And one of the things we have to think about all the time when we're coding is what platforms we're going to support, because a lot of times those new OSs, they don't filter out to everybody right away. Right, and this was the same, back in my day with web, right, where we would put out a web application either for a corporation or a publicly facing one, and the first question we have to ask is, what is the minimum browser we're going to support? So, back then it was like, well, people still use IE5 in this organization or whatever, so we would have to so all those new cool things that would come out every year, we'd have to say, oh, that's so cool, but we can't use it because we have to support, we still have to support Netscape or Firefox or whatever, so we'd have to we would have to shoot for the lowest common denominator, and that made sense for a long time. The downside of shooting for the lowest common denominator is people who had people were doing stuff that was much cooler, much more current, and if you have to support something like IE8 or IE6 or whatever, right, you just can't do all those kind of cool things everybody else does. Well, you can, but it's clumsy and all this kind of stuff. So now with apps, we're kind of getting that. I mean, we kind of have a similar thing, right? And we have so just in the last few months, we've had WWDC for Apple, and we've had Google I/O for Google, obviously. So we learning about the new Android and the new iOS operating systems. And one of the things we always have to ask is what is a low, whenever we do something new, is what is the lowest platform we're going to support, right? Not so much for our own apps. So for our own apps, if we put something out that say, it doesn't support Android like 2.2 or something like that, that's cool. We're fine with that, right? But sometimes with clients, it's difficult with clients because they have to know these kind of things, right? When we quote, we say, okay, we're only going to support as low as Android, Android 3 Gingerbread or whatever, right? Because so that way when they come back to us later and say, hey, my friend Dave, who last bought a smartphone in 2010, he can't seem to get to the Android app, what's going on? And then you have to say, oh, that's because he's on Android 2.2 or whatever, and then they, if they don't know about that, then they complain. So, and this is way more of an issue with Android than it is with iPhone. Now, over the last few months, they've announced the new platforms, but it's strangely enough that they both, the Apple developer site and the Android developer site both have up-to-the-date stats on the distribution of their operating systems. It's all up until June 5th, 2017, so just a few weeks ago. It's so strange that it's the same date. So I'll put the links down in the notes below, so you can keep up with this kind of stuff when you're making these kind of decisions. But if you just have a look here, first of all, on the Apple developer site, you can see they have this nice little chart here saying 86% of their devices have iOS 10, which makes sense really, because Apple controls the hardware and the software. Unlike with Android, where it's all these different distributors, Apple controls everything, right? So, but there are still 11% on iOS 9, and earlier than that, it's only 3%. I would never go below iOS. Well, I wouldn't go below iOS 8 just to be on the safe side, right? But so it's much easier. And if you have an iPhone or an iOS device, you know why this is, because every 5 seconds they're telling you to upgrade. They're always saying, hey, there's new version available, upgrade now, upgrade now. It's like I have all these testing devices in my bag, and every time I open it up, I'm bombarded with, oh, you have to upgrade, you have to upgrade. And then you say, okay, yeah, just upgrade. Can't you just do this in the background? I said, no, terms and conditions, right? It is so annoying. The Apple just nags you all the time, right? So, so it's not so much an issue with Apple. It's nice that you don't have to think about the lower levels of code and all this kind of stuff. Although we did have one just a few weeks ago where we were doing a hybrid Ionic app, and we had a bit of JavaScript that wasn't working in an older version of Safari, right? So we were using const instead of var. We were using a constant, right? And everything worked on all versions of iOS, but luckily we had an iOS sorry, an iPhone 4 around, and everything started breaking on that, and we were able to quickly go in and fix that. So it's just one of those little types of things that a compiler doesn't pick up because it's like in a web view, right? Now let's contrast this with the Android, the Android landscape. Now Android is just all over the place. They have this this chart here on the Android developer website. We've done another chart based on this data, which I'll put up here in a minute. But here you can see that that Nougat, like the most recent one, when I say most recent, it came out last August, right? That has only got around 8% of the entire ecosystem. So you still got loads of people on Marshmallow, mostly on Marshmallow. Yeah, a lot of people still on Lollipop, a lot of people still on KitKat, but those lower ones, like we still, like a lot of our apps, we still support Android 2.3, and we really don't need to, right? And the reason for this is because, like, if you get your phone from Google, if you have, like I only get Nexus devices now, because when those new platforms come out, when the new OS upgrades come out, I really want to get to, I want to try that kind of stuff. It's just really cool. And if you're like on Samsung or one of the other manufacturers, they don't really have any incentive to roll out new versions, right? When you bought the phone, so they'll take forever to roll out a version of the new platform, right? And usually, I can remember having a Samsung Galaxy S3, I think it was S3, and constantly waiting for them to bring out the new versions of Android at the time, and it was just, and nobody was sure whether or not they would do it because they were jerks, right? So they weren't jerks, but they got to go through and test everything. They got to do all this kind of stuff for users that they don't even care if they keep, because they've already have the hardware, they're already on contract, all that kind of stuff. They would prefer you just go in and trade up to a higher phone. So it's much harder to do on Android. I would say stick with Ice Cream Sandwich 4.1 or above, but that's just me. I don't see any reason to go any lower than that, although the whole thing with Android is it's a cheap phone, right? And the nice thing about it being a cheap phone is that everybody has it. And a lot of times people, give it to their kids and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, just really quick today, those really good stats. I'll put the links to them over here down below. And that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.